The Shape of What Remained, Chapter 1 at 62, Daniel finally understood that desire was not merciful. It did not care about marriages that had survived illness. It did not care about children grown into decent people. It did not care about funerals attended, promises kept, years behaved correctly. Desire arrived late sometimes. That was its cruelest talent. It waited until a life had hardened around absence, then slipped quietly through the smallest crack. Eleanor was reading beside the fire when he understood this, not looking at him, not speaking, just turning a page while the house settled around them in winter silence, and his entire remaining life altered course without permission. The storm began sometime after midnight. Daniel heard the rain before he opened his eyes. A patient sound against the windows, not violent, persistent, the sort of weather that seemed less like an event than a decision. Beside him, Marianne slept with one hand beneath her cheek. Even now, after 34 years of marriage, she occupied sleep completely, deeply, trustingly. Daniel envied her for that. He had not slept deeply since his father died, though he rarely admitted it, even to himself. He eased carefully out of bed. The hallway was cold. Their house had always been difficult to heat in January. Marianne loved old homes in theory. Drafts, warped floors, stubborn pipes, these were apparently signs of character. Daniel had spent 2 decades repairing things no guest ever noticed. Downstairs, the kitchen glowed faintly from the light above the stove. He stopped when he saw her coat, dark wool, damp at the shoulders. Eleanor stood at the sink with her back to him, both hands wrapped around a mug. She had arrived that afternoon for the weekend, along with her husband, Robert, who was upstairs asleep in the guest room after too much wine and an hour-long argument about municipal politics no one else at the table had cared about. Daniel should have gone back upstairs. Instead, he said, "You're awake." She turned slightly, not startled. "I could say the same." Her voice carried the roughness of sleeplessness, or restraint. With Eleanor, the two often sounded alike. He crossed toward the counter slowly. "Is something wrong?" "No." A small pause. "I hate unfamiliar houses at night." "This house isn't unfamiliar." Her eyes lifted then. There it was again, that dangerous feeling of having entered a conversation already in progress. Rain moved against the windows behind her. The kitchen smelled faintly of coffee grounds and extinguished candles. Marianne had lit them during dinner because she thought electricity made people lonely. Daniel opened the cabinet automatically. "Tea? I already made some." "Of course you did." A shadow of a smile touched her mouth. He leaned against the opposite counter, not too close. The carefulness between them had become instinct years ago. "How long has it been?" he asked. "Since what?" "Since you slept properly." Eleanor looked down into her mug. "You always ask questions as if you already know the answer." "I ask because you look tired." "That's a polite way to say old." "I didn't say old. You thought it." "No," he said quietly, "not that." Something altered in the room then, small, almost invisible, but he felt it immediately. Eleanor took a sip of tea. "I shouldn't have come this weekend," she said. He frowned. "Why?" "Because Marianne notices things. She notices everything." "Yes." The word lingered between them. Daniel looked toward the ceiling, toward the sleeping shape of his wife somewhere above them. Marianne, with her attentive silences and impossible intuition. Marianne, who had once told him, after a dinner party 15 years earlier, "That woman frightens you." At the time, he had laughed. Now he said, "You're imagining this." "No," Eleanor replied. "I'm really not." The refrigerator hummed softly. Outside, thunder moved somewhere distant over the water. Daniel crossed toward the window. The garden beyond the glass had disappeared into darkness. In summer, it was Marianne's pride roses, climbing ivy, lavender bordering the stone path. Now it looked abandoned. "When did you become unhappy?" he asked. Eleanor gave a short breath that was not quite laughter. "You ask impossible questions at 2 in the morning." "Answer it anyway." She remained quiet long enough that he thought she might refuse. Then, "I don't think it happened all at once." No, I think people become unhappy the way rooms become dusty, very slowly, while they're busy with other things." Daniel looked at her. "You used to fight more," she continued. "You remember that? With Marianne? With yourself?" He smiled faintly. "That sounds exhausting." It probably was. "And now you're calm." "You say that like criticism." Eleanor met his eyes over the rim of her mug. "It is criticism." He laughed once under his breath, though something inside him tightened painfully. There had always been this peculiar honesty between them, not the honesty of confession. Worse, the honesty of recognition. She had met him when they were both 38. Late enough to understand consequences, early enough for those consequences to matter. At the time, Daniel had been teaching architecture at Columbia. Eleanor had come to interview him for a magazine profile about public space and emotional memory, an article neither of them remembered particularly well afterward because something else had happened beneath the conversation, not attraction exactly. Attraction was simpler. No, it had felt like discovering a familiar voice in a foreign country. He remembered Marianne picking him up from the train station that night. "You're quiet," she'd said. Long day. Did the interview go badly? And Daniel, after a pause too brief to qualify as deception, had answered, "No, fine, fine," the most dangerous word in the language. Eleanor set down her mug. "You disappeared for a while," she said. "What do you mean? After your brother died?" Daniel's expression stilled. Rain pressed harder against the windows. "He died," Daniel said carefully. "People disappear after that. You never spoke about him again." There wasn't much to say. There was probably too much to say. He looked away. His younger brother Michael had been dead 9 years now. A sudden stroke at 53, one ordinary Tuesday afternoon interrupted permanently. Daniel still reached for the phone sometimes before remembering there was no one left to answer with his childhood voice. "You know," Eleanor said softly, "Robert cried exactly once after his mother died." Daniel waited. He apologized for it afterward. Something in her tone made him turn back toward her. "She told you that?" "No," Eleanor said. "I watched it happen." The kitchen fell quiet again. He understood suddenly, with startling clarity, that she had not come downstairs because she couldn't sleep. She had come downstairs because she could no longer bear the life waiting upstairs, and the knowledge of that moved through him like heat. Dangerous because it felt less like temptation than permission. He straightened slowly from the counter. "You should go back to bed," he said. Yes, neither of them moved. Eleanor folded her arms loosely against herself. "Do you ever think," she began, then stopped. "What? That you became the person everyone needed and then forgot how to become anyone else?" Daniel did not answer immediately. A pipe knocked somewhere inside the wall. Finally, he said, "Marianne would hate that sentence." "She would, because it sounds self-pitying." "And is it?" He smiled tiredly. "Probably." Eleanor studied him for a long moment. "You love her," she said. It was not a question. "Yes." "And she loves you." "Yes." Another silence. Then Eleanor nodded once, as though confirming something privately devastating. "That's what makes this so terrible." Daniel felt his pulse shift. The rain, the dim kitchen light, her face pale with exhaustion and something far more dangerous than exhaustion. He understood now that they had crossed into forbidden territory long ago. They had simply done it so carefully neither of them had named it. He should have ended the conversation. Instead, he said, "What exactly is terrible?" Her eyes filled first with surprise, then anger. "You really want me to answer that?" "Yes." "No, you don't," I asked. Eleanor stepped back from the counter abruptly. "This is the problem with you," she said quietly. "You wait years to ask the question, and then you ask it as though timing has nothing to do with consequence." Daniel stared at her. Upstairs, the house remained perfectly still. "You think restraint makes you honorable," she continued. "But sometimes restraint is just cowardice with better manners." The words landed cleanly. He could not remember the last time someone had spoken to him with such precision, perhaps because no one else knew where to aim. "You're angry," he said. "Yes. Why now?" Eleanor laughed softly then, but there was grief inside it. "Because I'm tired," she said. "Because I'm 60 years old and suddenly aware that most of my life is no longer ahead of me. Because I have spent 20 years being careful around you and I no longer remember what the carefulness was protecting." Daniel opened his mouth. Nothing came out. A terrible tenderness rose in him then. Fast, unmanageable. He saw all at once the years between them, Christmas dinners, conferences, shared taxis, long emails about books neither of them truly cared about, the 1,000 disciplined evasions that had allowed this feeling to survive by never fully existing. And beneath all of it, a hunger neither had permitted into language. Eleanor looked at him differently now, as though something irreversible had finally occurred. Maybe it had. "You should hate me for saying this," she whispered. "I don't. That's worse." Daniel crossed the kitchen before he fully realized he was moving. Not quickly, not dramatically, just one step, then another. Eleanor did not retreat. He stopped close enough to see the fatigue beneath her eyes, the faint silver threading through her dark hair, the pulse moving once at the base of her throat. Neither of them touched the other. That restraint remained, but now it felt fragile. "Daniel," she said. He had never heard his name sound like that before. Not romantic, not pleading, like grief discovering its own voice. And suddenly he understood with absolute certainty that if he kissed her, their lives would divide permanently into before and after. The knowledge passed between them silently. Then footsteps sounded overhead. Both of them stepped apart instantly. The moment shattered so completely it almost seemed imagined. Marianne appeared in the doorway wearing her robe, one hand against the frame. For one unbearable second, nobody spoke. Then Marianne looked from Eleanor to Daniel, not suspicious, not yet, only attentive. I wondered where everyone had gone, she said softly. Eleanor recovered first. I couldn't sleep. Marianne nodded once. The storm's getting worse. Yes, Daniel said, but his voice sounded unfamiliar to him now. Marianne studied him carefully. Are you all right? There it was again. That impossible intuition. Daniel forced himself to smile. Of course. A pause. Then Marianne crossed the kitchen toward the kettle, calm, graceful, entirely ordinary. Yet Daniel had the horrifying sense that something essential had already shifted inside the room, that all three of them were standing on ice that had begun, very quietly, to crack. And Marianne, reaching for another mug without looking at either of them, said, "You know what's strange?" No one answered. She filled the kettle slowly at the sink. "I had the oddest dream about the two of you."